Literally no offense to anything. They were very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of back to 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
So let's rewind to the moment the downfall began. And no, it wasn't a Rachel Zegler interview or a leaked trailer or a viral TikTok. The match that lit the fuse.
This would have been a lot better if they, had a strong male along with her, a prince, if it wasn't about socialism, if they didn't remove the dwarves, if they had real dwarves.
Peter Dinklage. Before Disney even finished casting Snow White, Dinklage made headlines by calling the project a step backward. On a podcast, he blasted the idea of rebooting a fairy tale that, in his words, was about 7 dwarfs living in a cave together. He said it was offensive, outdated, and deeply problematic, and he didn't stop there. He accused Disney of being hypocritical, saying they were patting themselves on the back for casting a Latina lead while still using backward storytelling tropes.
They're remaking the movie, they just got rid of the dwarfs. Okay,
but what do they call them?
Why would they
now,
get
too?
rid of the dwarves, though?
Magical creatures.
But they have one token dwarf amongst these magical creatures.
His words weren't subtle. They hit headlines across the world. And from that moment on, Snow White was under the microscope. Disney responded, and by responded, I mean they hit panic mode. They restructured the entire film's approach to the dwarfs. And just like that, the traditional 7 dwarfs, gone, replaced with a ragtag CGI-heavy group of magical beings that nobody could explain. That wasn't just a creative shift. That was a direct result of Dinklage's commentary, and the public knew it.
You actually just went backwards. You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. The disability, like we're a disability group, you just erased that whole image.
Here's where it gets messy. By the time Rachel Zegler started filming, the studio was already in defense mode. The original charm of Snow White was gone, and in its place, a politically cautious, visually confusing mess of a film that no one seemed fully committed to, and according to several production insiders, Rachel felt it. She reportedly grew frustrated during filming, not just with the online pressure, but with the direction the project was going in. Rumors began swirling that Rachel felt the blame was unfairly placed on her, that the movie was being weaponized online as a woke flop, when in reality, she was stuck in the middle of a much larger corporate scramble.
Argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV, there's power of television, and to put 7 people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there.
And quietly, she started pointing fingers. Word spread that Rachel blamed the tone shift, the dwarfs, erasure, and the general audience confusion not on Disney, but on Peter Dinklage's commentary. According to leaks, she believed his viral comments forced Disney into overcorrecting, creating a version of the film that had no clear identity, and gave her a role that was impossible to play authentically.
If the story is offensive, change the story, don't change the characters.
Okay, now this is where the tea hits the floor. In one interview, Rachel made a very specific comment. She said, "There were creative misalignments early on that really changed the tone of the story." She didn't name names, but fans immediately connected the dots, especially since she went on to talk about how hard it is to play a character that no longer reflects what the story originally stood for. Was that shade toward Disney? Sure, but was it also shade at the person who triggered the entire rewrite of the dwarfs, the characters, and the vibe of the film? Fans think so. Reddit lit up. TikTok theory channels ran wild, and before long, a whole sub-narrative had formed. Rachel blames Dinklage. And honestly, it's not hard to believe. She didn't change the dwarfs. She didn't remove the prince. She didn't demand a gritty feminist reboot of a fairy tale classic. She was cast into the middle of a PR firestorm and told to carry it all, while Dinklage said his piece and vanished.
Peter Dinklage destroyed Disney and could end up costing the company over $100 million.
Here's the thing, Peter Dinklage never clarified his stance after that first interview. He didn't backtrack. He didn't support the film once it was reworked. He didn't say, "Hey, I respect what they're trying to do." Instead, he went completely silent. And that silence only made things worse. Because as the backlash to Snow White grew, so did the speculation that Peter Dinklage was distancing himself on purpose, not just from the film, but from the entire mess he accidentally helped create. Insiders say Disney expected him to come back around and support the final product. Maybe a quote, maybe a red carpet appearance. He did none of that. Fans took notice. Commenters began asking, so he started this whole change, and now he's ghosting the film? Where's Peter now that the actors are getting dragged? And that silence paired with Rachel's increasingly frustrated tone, turned one man's opinion into the inciting incident of a full-blown Hollywood PR disaster.
Disney has cast Rachel Zegler to play Snow White, which caused a lot of controversy because Zegler is Hispanic and the character is traditionally German.
By the time trailers dropped and Disney started pushing Snow White to the public, it was already too late. The controversy over the dwarfs, the modernized storyline, and the complete erasure of the prince had already gone viral. And Rachel, Zegler became the unwilling face of all of it. According to leaks from people close to the production, Rachel was allegedly upset and overwhelmed, not just by the sudden creative changes, but by the fact that she was now being blamed for things she had no control over. Fans were turning on her. Headlines were dissecting every word she said. Comment sections exploded with criticism of her attitude, her interviews, her performance, even though many of those decisions came from above her pay grade. And behind the scenes, word spread that she saw Dinklage's viral commentary as the spark that sent the studio into panic. She may not have said it publicly, but reportedly, she believed his comments forced Disney into trying too hard to avoid offense. And in the process, they lost the core of the story. She was left defending a movie that wasn't hers anymore, and it showed.
The controversy is being compared to Halle Bailey's Little Mermaid, which did lose $50 million, making only $555 million in a budget of $250 million.
Not everyone was buying the idea that Rachel was just caught in the storm. Some fans, critics, and even former Disney insiders argued that Rachel had opportunities to speak up, to advocate for the story she wanted to tell, or to push back. When the vision got murky, they pointed out that, as a rising A-lister with serious buzz after West Side Story, she had visibility, credibility, and a platform. And yet, she said nothing until the backlash started. From their perspective, Dinklage may have started a conversation about representation, but that didn't erase Disney's responsibility for how they reacted, or Rachel's silence while it happened. On forums, fans argued that this wasn't just about dwarfs or a missing prince. It was about unclear messaging, confused pacing wooden character arcs, and an identity crisis that ran deeper than just one. Podcast interview. Still, the narrative that Rachel blamed Dinklage stuck, because fans always look for simple answers. And in this case, a feud between two high-profile names was easier to understand than corporate mismanagement.
Peter Dinklage comes into this as when Rachel Zegler was cast. He laughed at Disney, saying it's fake progressivism. The reason being that Peter Dinklage, who does have achondroplasia, finds the depiction of the seven dwarfs very offensive.
Meanwhile, Disney said nothing. Not about the dwarves, not about the feud, not about the creative overhaul, not about the backlash. Nothing. This wasn't by accident. This was the classic Disney playbook. Let the internet fight it out. Let the controversy burn itself out. Stay above the mess. Focus on the next movie. And for a while, it almost worked. The headlines moved on. New trailers dropped. Rachel kept doing interviews, though her tone started shifting. Less excited, more scripted. And Peter Dinklage, still silent. No retraction. No support. No quote. Nothing. But silence has a cost. Because without clarification, the narrative that Dinklage broke the movie and Rachel carried the blame only grew stronger.
Peter Dinklage said that Disney casting Rachel Zegler is their way to feel good about themselves while ignoring a much bigger problem.
At this point, Snow White wasn't just a reboot, it became a cautionary tale, a remake haunted by last-minute rewrites, fear of offending every group at once, stars caught in crossfire, and a fanbase that felt betrayed. What started as a comment about dwarfs became a symbol of how fragile modern remakes are. One quote, one misstep, one viral interview, and suddenly, your entire $200 million film is a meme before it hits theaters. Peter Dinklage had spoken out before about casting, stereotypes, representation, and been praised for it. But this time, his words triggered a production-wide rewrite that may have done more harm than good. And Rachel, whether or not she really blamed him, she became the scapegoat, the lead actress, left defending a film that was already off course before she ever stepped on set.
Peter Dinklage was criticized by some actors with similar conditions, like Dylan Postl said Peter Dinklage was being selfish and that community needs more work.
Let's be honest, the internet didn't come for Peter Dinklage the way they came for Rachel. In fact, even as the movie bombed and articles called it soulless, confused, and a tonal mess, Dinklage's name barely came up in the backlash. Most fans either forgot he commented at all or continued to praise him as someone who spoke the truth, even though his comments arguably derailed the entire project. Meanwhile, Rachel was dealing with PR nightmares misquoted, interviews, alleged on-set frustrations, and online bullying for months she couldn't win. Critics labeled her arrogant. Fans called her ungrateful. Comment sections questioned her attitude, her politics, her performance, even her smile. And through it all, Dinklage untouched. This imbalance only fueled the idea that Rachel felt cornered and blamed someone who walked away untouched.
There's now an effort in Hollywood to not cast little people, instead do things like cast Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa.
As the storm continued to build around Snow White, Disney's internal teams reportedly found themselves torn between two impossible choices: keep pushing forward and risk an even louder backlash, or quietly let the film pass by with minimal marketing, hoping the internet would forget. In the end, they tried to do both. Disney made a half-hearted attempt at spinning the narrative, releasing press snippets about how the film was about inclusivity, female empowerment, and rethinking what it means to be a princess. But the problem was, no one was listening anymore. The narrative had already taken root. The film was broken. It had been reworked beyond recognition, and no amount of rebranding could convince fans otherwise. Test screening reports leaked early. Footage got slammed. The public had already formed its opinion. And worse, that opinion had nothing to do with the film itself. It had everything to do with what people thought it was trying to be.
Rachel Zegler is supposed to play Snow White. She's Latina. It says, literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback that they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White, but you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
For Rachel Zegler's fans, the rumor that she blamed Dinklage for the film's chaos wasn't just a scandal, it was a coping mechanism. On one hand, it made sense. Rachel was young, new to the spotlight, and suddenly caught in the middle of a historic-level backlash. Of course she'd be frustrated. Of course she'd look for why this project had become such a disaster. And what better explanation than the moment everything changed? When Peter Dinklage's viral comments forced Disney to completely reimagine the film mid-production? On the other hand, blaming Dinklage also felt convenient. It made a complex situation sound simple. Too simple. Because as some fans and insiders pointed out, Snow White had problems far deeper than just the dwarfs. The script was weak, the tone was confused. The plot veered from nostalgic to cynical and back again, and no one, not the director, not the cast, not the marketing team, seemed to agree on what kind of film it was supposed to be. So while Rachel's rumored frustration with Dinklage made sense emotionally, it didn't explain why the movie fell apart creatively. Still, the rumor stuck, and the media ran with it. Because that's what Hollywood does. It finds a feud and feeds it to the wolves.
Take a step back and look at what you're doing there. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but then you're still making that backwards story about 7 dwarves living in a cave together. What the fuck are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? I guess I'm not loud enough.
Here's where the double standard becomes impossible to ignore. While Rachel's name trended for all the wrong reasons, Peter Dinklage remained untouched. He didn't clarify his comments. He didn't show up to defend the film. He didn't walk the red carpet or issue a follow-up quote. Instead, he quietly moved on, doing interviews about new projects, offering generic statements about storytelling and representation, and refusing to engage with the Snow White mess. If interviewers brought it up, he sidestepped the question or offered a measured, vague take. And that silence worked in his favor, because by not engaging, he avoided becoming a target. But Rachel? She didn't have that option. Her face was on the posters. Her name was on every promo. And she had to do press for a movie she reportedly no longer even believed in. That's how you end up with a lead actress giving dead-eyed interviews and fans dissecting every word like it's a war crime.
I mean, there's the easy joke of, well, we didn't see you on the soapbox, Peter.
It's true.
But
all of this, the feud, the flop, the silence, exposed something even bigger. Snow White wasn't just another remake, it was the remake. The original Disney princess. The one that launched the empire. And if Disney couldn't get this one, right? If this reboot felt like a soulless, confused mess wrapped in corporate panic, then what hope is there for the rest? Online forums exploded with discussion. Some blamed Peter Dinklage for starting the PR crisis, others blamed Rachel for how she handled the press. But many fans zoomed out and saw what was really happening. Disney's remake era is broken. Too many changes, too many agendas, not enough soul. And instead of building timeless classics, they were producing expensive content pieces that felt like brand-safe lectures. Snow White wasn't just a flop, it was a red flag.
It's this weird thing where he's saying, like, oh, it's bad that we're still doing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, so he doesn't necessarily want that. But as little people actors, it's like, well, we kind of want to work. We kind of want.
That's why the rumored tension between Rachel and Peter Dinklage resonated so deeply with fans, because it wasn't just about two celebrities. It became a symbol of the chaos behind the scenes. Veteran actor making valid points that spiraled into overcorrection, a rising star caught in the crossfire, asked to represent something she never signed up for, a studio scrambling to rewrite, repurpose, and rebrand a fairy tale, and losing the magic in the process in time. People may forget the headlines, but they'll remember the feeling. The confusion, the backlash, the silence, and the sense that nobody ever really knew what kind of movie Snow White was supposed to be.
That part, and if that's what's available, then that's what we'd like to do. But at the same time, I get what he's saying, because yeah, people are like, well, was it that bad? I go, yeah, because at the time, dwarves really didn't have any representation.
Whether Rachel Zegler truly pointed the finger at Peter Dinklage or not, what happened with Snow White has become more than a behind-the-scenes feud. It's now a case study across the entire entertainment industry. Everyone's talking, not just about who said what, but about how fast a blockbuster can unravel when internal decisions clash with external noise. Producers, showrunners, and casting directors are reportedly using Snow White as a quiet example of what not to do. How not to let press comments spiral into creative overcorrections. How not to greenlight a legacy remake without a clear plan. How not to throw actors into firestorms with no guidance or protection. Because this wasn't just a box office underperformer. It became the blueprint for a failed adaptation. And the cautionary tale Disney never wanted attached to its crown jewel.
Or would you say midget? Midget, dwarf, they're out of work. They're replaced by CGI things. Yes. Like, this is just a perfect
example that.
When there's
Thing 12.
There's no guiding principle, just progress for the sake of progress, and you're just trying to weave around a fence after a
Once upon a time, Disney's name was a guarantee, a safety net. It didn't matter what you remade. If it had that castle logo on it, people showed up. But Snow White cracked that illusion. No amount of nostalgia could save a film weighed down. By script confusion, fan alienation, silent cast feuds, controversial rewrites, and a lead star burdened with explaining decisions she didn't make. Suddenly, people weren't seeing the magic anymore. They were seeing the machinery. Every reimagining felt like a branding pitch, every update like a marketing checkbox. And when Rachel Zegler stood on that press tour, trying to defend a film critics hadn't even seen yet, audiences weren't buying it. They saw a studio out of sync with its audience, with its cast, and with its own creative goals.
Someone goes like, hey, Seven Dwarfs is offensive to midgets. You're like, oh, okay, so let's just not employ any of them.
Yes, Peter Dinklage.
Since filming, Rachel Zegler has tried to move forward. She's taken new roles, kept her public image focused, and distanced herself from Snow White without directly disowning it. But the internet doesn't forget. Whether fair or not, her name is now linked to a project that became a public spectacle, and that kind of association doesn't fade overnight. Every interview she gives now carries subtext. Every casting announcement comes with comments referencing Snow White, and every time another reboot gets announced, people ask the same thing. Will this be another Rachel Zegler situation? For a rising star, that kind of narrative is hard to shake, and that's the real fallout. Not just a flopped film, but a career moment she'll be answering for years.
Snow White, let's go through this, right? There's no prince. A woman doesn't need a prince.
Oh, Lord.
Really? Okay, good luck back then.
As for Peter Dinklage, he walked away with his legacy intact. But that doesn't mean there's no scrutiny. In industry circles, some are quietly questioning whether his critique overreached. Not because it wasn't valid, but because it triggered a domino effect that rewrote an entire production. And when that rewrite backfired, he stayed out of the conversation. Critics and fellow actors have started asking if a single comment can change the course of a $200 million film. Should there be more responsibility in how those comments are delivered? Dinklage is still respected, rightfully so, for his career, his advocacy, and his refusal to sugarcoat the industry. But Snow White has added a new wrinkle to his reputation, a man whose words sparked a shift the studio wasn't ready to handle. And that legacy, like Rachel's, will follow him, even if it's quieter.
We need a prince to save her, and not surrounded by 7 weird people. Oh, okay, just CGI fictional goblins, I guess.
So what now? Disney's not speaking publicly about the Snow White disaster, but industry reports say the studio is rethinking everything behind the scenes. Future live-action projects are being reviewed. Scripts are being toned down. Casting is being handled with more discretion. And test screenings, they're becoming more aggressive and earlier in the process. There's even buzz that Disney might scrap parts of its reboot universe altogether, or quietly pivot toward animated originals and streaming-safe releases until the public's trust returns. The studio hasn't confirmed anything. But in Hollywood, silence says a lot. And when your flagship reboot becomes a cultural punchline, there's only one thing left to do: start over.
And I get it, there's a difference between spoiling and whatever, but to go out and badmouth everybody and talk smack about, older movies in the same franchise, the canon story, I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like they would have had better control over that.
The rumored tension between Rachel Zegler and Peter Dinklage may never be confirmed. It might have been frustration, projection, studio spin, or just internet imagination. But even if it's just a rumor, it became the emotional center of this entire disaster. 2 performers, 1 story, one trying to make it in an industry that turned on her, one calling out injustice and then stepping away, and both trapped in a storm that spiraled out of anyone's control. That's why this story sticks. Because Snow White wasn't just about dwarfs or dialogue or casting. It became a warning about what happens when creative intent collapses under corporate panic, when public commentary dictates plot structure, when a legacy title is repackaged, retitled, and released without heart, and when no one knows who's actually telling the story anymore. So, what do you think? Was Rachel Zegler unfairly blamed? Did Peter Dinklage spark a rewrite that doomed the movie? Could Disney have salvaged this if they'd stuck to a clear vision? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss the next story the studios don't want you to hear. Because in this town, fairy tales don't always end happily ever after. Sometimes they don't even make it past the trailer.